Hi, this is Ashwani from Criminal Research and Review. Some of us from the organization were in conversation with Shivangi Sharma, who's an advocate from Bhopal and a graduate of HNLU Raipur. She's also a mentor at Criminal Research and Review. This conversation was a part of her law school POSH project where we're trying to examine the effective implementation of USC POSH Regulation 2015 in law schools across India. If you are a PhD or UG law student enrolled in any Indian institute, please head over to our website or find a link in the description where we're requesting you to fill a questionnaire and provide your inputs on certain aspect of the regulations. So, welcome Shivangi for this conversation, and we are very happy to have you here. Uh,
I'm really happy to be here and discuss this very, very important topic.
Thank you. Now I'll hand over to Samriddhi, who will start with the first question.
Hello, ma'am. So the first question that I wanted to ask was about the initiatives at HNLU. So whenever we say posh, we often think about workplaces, corporates, offices and establishments, but we hardly think about the higher educational institutions. So could you please take us to the projects and initiatives relating to posh that you were involved back in HNLU?
So you're correct. Whenever we think of posh, we only think of workplaces, completely forgetting that universities and higher education institutions are workplaces because we as students don't consider them workplaces. And in fact, UGC regulations, like they came right after the posh law, and they have strict rules about implementing all those regulations in the internal policies of all higher education institutions. So in HNLU back when I was there, so it all started with the HNLU protest. Actually, so few of us girls, we have always been you know in talks about how to get the in timings of our college curbed. So we would congregate, girls from different batches would meet and think of what can we do about it. But our administration has always been very unsupportive, very you know basically not very student friendly, and this is a kind of request they would never entertain. But the day HNLE protest actually started with the girls hostel. The day the Chhattisgarh High Court had held the our then VC's tenure illegal, and the same day the protest started with the girls hostel, sitting on a dharna for curbing the in timing, and then the boys hostel joined. Basically, the entire student community was there asking all those questions we had been talking about asking to the administration, and we finally had the courage and the right time to ask those questions. And from the in timing issue, it led to the corrupt administration of our VC back then and him mishandling sexual harassment cases. Now, even though it started with the one time student had approached our then VC about the sexual harassment case, and respondent in that particular case was a faculty member, and the VC did not do anything about it. But it also led to a lot of people coming out with their stories of being harassed by faculty members, students, and people outside. So it became like a huge movement of how deep seated the issue was. Even we weren't aware. So every time any such incident would happen, it would be discussed in few small group of friends, and that's where it would end because all of us knew the hard truth that administration would never entertain all of this, even though an ICC was in place for the sake of it, but it wasn't functioning, and so it started there, and then there were many other. We circulated a form for people to just register their complaints, not register, but just share if they have ever had any incident of sexual harassment. And we received almost 75 complaints in the first day of circulating that Google form, which was quite scary because we weren't we didn't know that the problem is that bad in our college, right? And then later, like the administration changed, and like our first step was to, get all the previous complaints, like the proceedings to commence, and like the newer complaints that we had seen, they being registered, and ICC taking any action on this. Also, HNLU always like knew the bitter truth about certain faculty members of them being sexist and not just sexist but also very inappropriate. But it was like a thing. Like all of like what I had heard from like my seniors, it was like just ignore it, or it would be just one semester you would have to face that particular faculty member, and nobody would support you. So the entire attitude, even in student body also, was very unwilling. Nobody was ready to take a step, even though everyone would talk about how inappropriate that person was, but it would be in a very joking manner. Nobody would take it seriously. And when and these are the talks that would happen in common spaces. And if this talk is happening in like say girls' hostel, everyone would agree how uncomfortable it makes whenever like the certain person makes such remarks, like very obviously sexist and inappropriate remarks. But everybody was discouraged by the fact that we like will pay attention or do anything about it because like there are certain faculty members who are not just faculty members but also whole administrative folks. So you understand like their influence on the administration is more and they are more powerful against the students. So after we won the protest, and our biggest demand was to make our campus safe for like students and have the policy in place and have ICC functioning properly. So we had a couple of administrative changes as well. But then we realized that there is even though ICC is there and they have, they notified that we will be, commencing proceedings in the previous matters and taking up new matters and, kind of assured us. But we realized that there is no policy in place specific, like customized for HNRU, which should be there as per the regulations. We can't just rely on POSH or UGC regulations, right? So HNLU has a student-led magazine called Hidayat. Their editors, Pragyajan and Sri Lakshmi, like they thought that we should draft one, being students, and they reached out to me. So we made a team of like we sent out a post, asked for volunteers, and a bunch of students from different years. We all came together. We gathered like all the like other than UGC regulations and POSH law, we gathered all the policies of other colleges, DU, JNU, NLS, Nalsar, NLU, all the colleges. We went through those and then drafted a policy like as per HNLU like administration and its functioning. But after that, getting it into administration's hand was a really big task because like the regime changed a bunch of times, and also like when finally we had a permanent VC, he was drowned in work so much because we had a lot of mess created over the years, right, by previous administrations and like the current like the current he's quite creative when he's available to students like the previous ones, like we could directly approach him, but due to paucity of time and everything, we could never had a proper meeting. But now that I've been told that it did like he did go through it and he did give it to like the ICC deciding officer. She is a professor from a different college, and like they had decided to go through her policy and take and deliberated on ours. So I'm not sure what happened to our policy, but as I've been told, they they have a policy by which the ICC functions. So I mean, you see, the administration thinks constituting an ICC and commencing proceedings, it's what their work is. They completely neglect the part that their main goal here is to make the campus like sexual harassment free. They have to have a zero tolerance policy for it, and something as easy as putting posters about those sexual harassment policy in conspicuous places, like something that easy is they have not even done. So you see, there are a lot of like the entire problem lies with the fact that the administration is always unwilling to take those strong steps to take these problems seriously. Yeah.
I just have a follow-up question and I'll hand it over to Sanik. So you mentioned that there were about 75 instances once the Google form was circulated, right? About 75
Yeah.
complaints were registered with the Google form. So did any of the instances see action being taken, or all of them were just dismissed or not done anything upon?
No, so the Google form was circulated for the student body, and the student body can't do anything. Like unless like the agreement decides to go to the ICC, it was just to like increase confidence amongst students that or and like get an actual figure of these incidences of sexual harassment. Some of them did move to ICC. I'm not sure what happened to the individual cases, but a lot of these complaints were anonymous. A lot of them were unwilling to go to ICC for these. A lot of these were actually instances from classrooms and public space. Not something happened to them individually, but a lot of inappropriate things being said during lectures. In fact, recently also something like this happened, like very recently, a month or two ago. And these are online classes, right? All these classes are being recorded. And during an IPC lecture, while explaining 375, 376, like the faculty member said inappropriate things, and someone from the class, some girl, obviously a girl, called him out, to which he made a joke about it or something. And a lot of like students in that class agreed that this was inappropriate. The faculty member shouldn't have said that. We should do something about it. So the girl who called the faculty member out, like, this person reached out to me, and then she asked me what to do about it. And my obvious answer was to approach ICC. And I complained also, but then she didn't go ahead with it because she saw her batchmates attitude that is like, oh, nothing's gonna happen. Why are you like moving ahead with this? The faculty member is gonna get away from this, and why are you like he will cut take it out on us during our exams and all of that. So the whole discouragement from the batchmates made her not to pursue it. So this is another problem with the student body in itself, because so see, sensitization programs are for this very thing that people should, like, the people on whom these policies apply, they should know what exactly sexual harassment is, what exactly their recourse is, and how the university, like the administration, will help them in such a situation. And since they know nothing about it, they are always like underconfident for pursuing these complaints. So yeah.
Hello, ma'am. So, my question is, law schools are allegedly considered as institutions that preach liberty, and lawyers are considered as social engineers. How and to what extent do you relate to these allegations as far as posh issues are considered?
So honestly, I am extremely disappointed in law schools in general, and us lawyers being social engineers. We are none of those things. These are just really fancy words to describe us. And this all attitude is when someone decides to go for that. We will be these social engineers, or makers of a better society, and we will bring the necessary changes. All of this goes down the drain the moment you enter law school and you see all those red tapes in front of you, and that spirit in you of changing the society dies because you don't see that environment around you. The reason we could have those complaints coming, we could have all these students coming out and with their stories and actually believing us, uh, to do something about it, was the fact that protests was going on in our college back then, and everyone had this spirit of you know justice and truthfulness, etc., etc. And the moment protest was over, everyone went back to their daily routines, and nobody like seriously pursued uh, you know the problem of sexual harassment. Like nobody nudged the administration to get the policies in place. Nobody was there to support, like after the protest, like if any incident had happened, nobody, like the students were not in general as supportive as they were during the protest. So also the problem is law schools work like any other higher education institution. Like the students are there to get done with their courses. The faculty members are there to teach the courses or not teach the courses a lot of times, but just get their salaries. There's a general lack of community, you know, that feeling of unity that, you know, we are here to for a certain purpose, or, you know, being law students and being, you know, upcoming lawyers, we have a better knowledge of how society works, how the legal system works, right? So that privilege of having that knowledge, we should be doing something about it, right? When we start with studying the constitution, and criminal law in general is set in a way that tells you about the society and why the legal system is a certain way, and the severe lacks in our legal system and justice system. Like, it is for us to understand, like, you know, how we could actually make better changes. And when you don't exercise that privilege of having that knowledge, how to change things around us, like just change things in their own institutions, how do you expect them to make any changes in society? So, like, until and unless that feeling is, you know, instilled in every student, not even in every single student, even in certain groups, that, you know, if they come together, actually talk about it, they can actually put administration. See, we did win the protest. A lot of NLUs over the years have had protests, and they did win it, right? And it did happen overnight. It took several weeks of like really hard protests. My college students went on a hunger strike for the protest. So you see, you like there has to be but then again, we had like one enemy against the entire student body, that everyone, regardless of their differences, came together. But that, you know, the understanding of what exactly the problem is and how it affects all of us is the problem with students. All of like most people in law schools come from a very, very privileged background, including me. So we don't really understand how it actually affects people. Like me being so adamant on implementing this policy was because like I have been sexually harassed since the age of 4 till today. Right, because these kind of incidents keep on happening, and I know like all my friends have had bad incidences, and in college I have seen people around me who like had met with certain incidents like that, and there is no other way to go about these things other than implementing policy, have proper you know system in place to approach the administration and get something done, right? So I don't believe that law schools have done anything to pave the way for other institutions with respect to posh policies.
I have a quick remark here. I'm sorry to interrupt. Now that we're talking about law schools, and you mentioned about the period when your college students went on hunger strike, and I remember there was maybe a year or 2 year time period when quite a few law colleges had some similar kind of stand against admin on these policies. There were like quite a few, some similar incidents of sexual harassment and in a few law colleges in India. And I thought maybe that was the time when law colleges could have picked up that moment to have a more nuanced discussion on these issues. But I don't think I think we sort of, it was still sort of there only, and there hasn't been any development so far. So one more thing that we talk about gender sensitization for students and faculties, but even administration and colleges themselves haven't come out of their shell to talk about these, not just forget about any particular incident, just about these policies that they are in place to protect you. They are not even comfortable talking about, if I may use that word, or talking about these things that you could say that if, let's say, they're talking about these policies in their at the time of admission or orientation session, they kind of feel that they are sort of repelling students from joining those colleges, and just because they're talking about it, it creates a bad reputation or something of that sort. So how do you suggest that we, they combat these, problems?
As during the orientation only, we are supposed to tell the the new students of any institution that the institution has a zero tolerance policy for sexual harassment, and these if certain this kind of incidents happen to you, these are the people, not like this is how you can approach the system, and this is how the proceedings will go. Like this is the general thing. Everyone, like every institution has like a duty as per the regulations. At least like these are the responsibilities of higher education institutions, to sensitize first about how their internal committee functions, and then about like in general gender sensitization awareness, and that is supposed to happen like almost every semester and at least every year who students come in. So like like what I would be saying is will not be anything new. It is something that has already been there since the inception of these regulations, right? The Saksham report also finds a mention in the regulations itself. It's an entire report about the lack of gender awareness in all higher education institutions, and how it can be tackled with, and how actually they can sensitize the entire education system, and also talks about how it's not just about faculty members and students, but also about everyone involved in running of an educational institution, like right from like your cleaning staff to your highest authorities. Everyone is a part of that institution. Everyone is in the campus, or even if not in the campus, they engage in the activities, and by that very means susceptible to any kind of sexual harassment, right? So first off, not just during the orientation program of new students, like the first in like general information about functioning of internal committee, and like complaints can be filed, how the committee can be approached, and when, not just how, when it can be approached, what kind of incident constitutes sexual harassment. That is something they're supposed to explain as well, and not just to students, but every single staff, every single person who comes in contact with the committee. Also, something we realized while we were drafting our policy is that during like fest or moot courts, any other function like that happens in our campus where students from other institutions also come, that is where we should be like most on our feet to tell about the sexual harassment policy at college, and how ICC can be approached, and when they can be approached, and because it's a time where everything like is happening so fast, and like there are a lot of people around, that is when ICC should actively, appoint volunteers, and put it in conspicuous places, put out primers, or put it on website, and put it on general social media about how, when they can approach ICC in case any incident happens. So these things very important, like the fact that like just not having a sensitization program, but actively making sure that it reached every single person who comes in contact with college functioning, should be aware of the policy in place, and how you know they can approach the system in case something happens, right? So this is something I think that lacks in almost every other university or like education institution.
So, ma'am, apart from this, can you tell us any other role which law schools should play in tackling these issues, like what you just mentioned? Apart from that, any other role?
See, like out of experience, say NLS, and like we all like NLS, like as an NLU which was established first, we all look up to its administration because it has the most experience, and they were the first one, I guess, in all the NLUs to come up with an internal policy, and their ICC being there for a really long time. But even though, like during the Me Too movement, like they had waves of Me Too movement. Even then, they were there were instances of sexual harassment, like really serious ones, and nobody was willing to file, even though like their ICC has been there for a really long time and they have had sensitization programs, and in general, like we assume that there must be like confidence in the students at least, and if something happens, they can approach. Like there would be okay. So as I was saying, that the administration has to proactively keep doing this, but also like generally among student bodies also, you have to ensure that the environment you are in is not hostile. This is literally the first objective that POSH law or UGC regulations come in with, that we have to ensure that the institution we study in is a safe place for all of us, and the environment is not hostile, and to ensure that not just sensitization programs would work, but there has to be active participation from the faculty members, from the administration, as well as from the students, to create that support, that community, that if anything like that happens, there will always be support, and there will always there like the system will work just fine for every single person, no matter who the respondent on the other side is, who is the assaulter, right? And other than that, we have a general lack of understanding of gender in itself. Like the moment we think of sexual harassment, our mind goes to like the aggrieved person must be a woman, the assaulter must be a man. Okay? The general lack of awareness about gender and intersectionality of within people, like who are the most vulnerable towards such incidences, this is something we never talk about, right? Even in gender sensitization programs, hardly will mention about people from the queer community, or just in general cishet men also getting harassed, right? So having a comprehensive set of like the policy being gender neutral first, like every institution's policy being gender neutral, but also be aware of like other genders and their vulnerability to sexual harassment, and the power dynamics between the person who got assaulted, like the aggrieved person, and the harasser. That is something like not that is generally not talked about even during the sensitization programs, because see, even in my college, most of the person who like the complaints came in was like against the faculty members, and you see the power and influence faculty member exercises in a higher education institution. So obviously every single student will be discouraged from going against them, and the administration also would have a very general discouraging attitude. So explaining uh, these power dynamics is very, very important, I believe, and administration has to go out of their way and explain that a very strong authority, if they are the respondent in such cases, they will have a like harsher approach, not even not a harsher approach, but they will come on strong in such cases, right? And see, if you look at the policy, all of it, not all of it, but most of it is there. That you're supposed to have ICC, you're supposed to train the faculty members, you're supposed to have awareness programs, you're supposed to. There's limitation periods on when this like the proceedings will be finalized, and you're supposed to like give out reports at the end of the year that what happened, like how many complaints were there, how many redressals were there, etc., etc. But the general lack of not just enthusiasm, but also like thousands of administrative work that is piled upon faculty members that delays the proceedings a lot. So in that case, the complainant also like, they also lose their enthusiasm in pursuing the complaint properly. The respondent also gets like in general, they get like, okay, nothing's gonna come out of it. They also get a little relieved, which it shouldn't be the case, especially like in non-frivolous cases. So, you know these are certain like problems with the even with the system, which even if it's implemented properly, like we have to look into. But this, like, it's so sad to say, like, this will come like after the policies like in place properly. Like, this is something that's it's a far-fetched problem to talk about at this point, because even the ICC which are constituted, they barely function properly, right? And in most of the institutions, I don't think the students or like any other members even aware that ICC exists, and what exactly are their function and what exactly are the responsibilities of their administration. Like, I remember, like, this was before the protest. Even then, we had the ICC which would function, but we had like quite a serious matter where some, like, during a college party, some people from outside came. They harassed some like seniors of mine, and they went to the police. I'm not sure what happened to the police complaint, but then they filed a complaint in the ICC, and then like faculty members who are not part of the ICC would come and interfere during the proceedings, and the complainants would get very uncomfortable. They wouldn't be able to like tell what actually happened with them. Like, things used to be that bad, and this is what has happened in my college, and I'm sure like instances like that must be there in other colleges as well. So even if like the system is in place, the people should be willing to like do their jobs properly. And for that to happen, they have to understand their responsibilities. And for that to happen, they have to have the general attitude of all that we say about law schools and lawyers, that we are social engineers, so we have to be like ethical and socially just about our works and our responsibilities, for making for having like for the campus to be like absolutely intolerant for sexual harassment.
So another thing that I wanted to ask was, do you feel that the global Me Too movement has had any particular impact on how these issues are tackled in law schools and Indian universities in general?
I do believe that, yes, because like during the first wave of Me Too, also a lot of us, like, not as a college per se, but a lot of students like posted about their incidences of sexual harassment, and a lot of it like were from like like not from their college experiences, but like other than that. But a lot of people like during that wave only came out of like them being like sexually harassed by like their fellow students or sometimes faculty members, and it shocked us to an extent that a lot of these harassers, as like people came out with, were like people we have like worked with, or we have like been friends with, or we are acquaintances with, because like residential campus, right? So everyone knows everyone, and everyone at some point hangs out with them or do some work with them, right? So in my college, in other NLUs and other universities as well, like a lot of friendships were broken because a lot of people came out, because these were the things that would be told in very closeted groups, right? And they would never come out. And when they actually came out in the light, like when some people discussed, a lot other people like had the courage to come out and tell their stories. And a lot of times those harassers would be like the same person would be the harasser. So it had a huge impact in the functioning of like law schools and in their general attitude towards these, because before this, like, most students would just be unaware, right? And like going into the gender binary, the girls, like, because the hostels are divided in girls and boys, girls hostel in usual would have these talks, But boys hostel would just be unaware and honestly quite unbothered about these. Like they wouldn't care. They would have this general attitude that like public in general has, that rapes or something happen in some remote areas or by some you know some random illiterate men, while they completely forget that rapists are someone who exists in our houses. They are a lot of times a child's father, uncle, someone. It's 90% of the time someone we know, right? Like this general lack of awareness and attitude is still there in law students, but it shouldn't be. But after the Me Too movement, everyone was so aware of their actions, which was refreshing to see, because then um, like most boys would like come and ask, like if like they would actually reassess their like past actions, whether what they did they or said might have been inappropriate. So it did bring out in light that how bad the situation is and how unaware and unbothered we have been in the past. So Me Too movement was a breath of fresh air. Why am I saying that? It was like scary, but at the same time it like did bring some positive changes. And I remember some of my interns also, like they said that it was a farce, the Me Too movement, and I actually like kind of gave them a huge lecture that how it wasn't, and if you think it was, you guys are living under a shell, because a lot of frivolous complaints also came in during that time. But that is true for any other movement in the history of humanity. Right? You cannot like obviously people will come in with fake complaints or fake stories, whatever, but they will always be lesser and the true ones will always be bigger, right? So yeah, there were a lot of changes in people's actions and the way they behave. They actually reassess, like everyone, no matter their gender or whatever. They always like they started paying more attention to their behavior and actually seeing the signs around them when if there can be incidents of sexual harassment, or if somebody has been harassed, how actually they can provide support. So yes, Me Too movement did help in that sense.
Right. So, another thing that I wanted to know was, so you also mentioned before that these guidelines as applicable on the higher education institutions are gender neutral. So, has this in any way helped the men and even the trans people in general to bring their complaints before the ICC, or like what has it been like?
So I haven't had a personal experience of it, like any genderqueer person coming out with their complaint for like file a complaint in the ICC. But I think I would answer that in negative, because like even the students are not very supportive of queer people, like till date, even in like more progressive of institutions, and NLUs being the most progressive institutions out of all. I don't think that like the student body in general is very supportive of queer people. So I don't think that has like they are still confident enough to approach the ICC, or if they have, I'm not, at least that has not happened in my college. I'm not aware if it has happened anywhere else. But also, I believe that any like at least NLUs, because I am from one and I know like a lot of people from other NLUs. I don't think that like the general student body is also very progressive and aware of queer people and like their rights being implemented. They're like straight up homophobic and queerphobic, right? And even before like the Naptejo Johar judgment came out, like me and my friends, we have been actively trying to like create a general awareness on like women rights and queer rights. But we saw the attitude in general, like there will only be handful of people who would be interested in like having a talk or discussion or like posting anything about it during like fests or anything. But after the judgment came out, we would hold such meetings more actively. And but then again, that handful of people would be like two handfuls and not more than that. So if students who are supposed to be the social engineers are not so willing or interested, I don't have any hopes from the administration. So again, it comes down to being willing and be that social, then like believing in the fact that we are that social engineer everyone keeps talking about, that we are the ones who will pave the way for the next generation. Because when we enter law school, this is the first thing we are taught. We have to have the uncomfortable topics discussed so that we can pave the way for the coming generation, right? We are supposed to be the ones, the most progressive ones who would lead the society ahead. Like this is what first year students are taught. This is what their debate topics are. This is how their mood topics would be. Uh, you know, this is how their mood problems would be like that. But that general attitude dies after first semester, and it is the responsibility. Like I don't have much hope from administration in general, but this is the responsibility of the seniors, of the students of the administration to keep that fire going. To that, and we all like beginning from 2014, like when like 2015 is when I joined college. Like this is when a lot of changes were happening in the political system of India, and the climate like quite significantly changed. A lot of such laws and policies were brought in which are directly contradictory to our constitution, right? So a lot of like there were like law students must like should be the ones openly talking about this, not just in their closeted circles, but you know in a larger open space, and educating their families about it. So I like very like I believe that we are the ones who it's our moral responsibility actually, being law students and being privileged enough to have that knowledge of political system of law and the rule of law, that we should be the ones educating others. And if we can't start with our own institutions, we have failed in our moral and constitutional responsibility.
Uh, just one quick comment on what Samriddhi asked. So we floated a questionnaire of a few 2-3 weeks back, asking law students to to give their inputs on how well these regulations have been implemented in their colleges. And there's one comment of there was one person left a comment which was on how their college have been, how supportive their college has been with respect to issues of LGBTQ community. And there was comment that whenever there was often these individuals from these communities will be mocked as, and will be it's they're not treated at the same part. So if forget about talking about their issues, them being harassed, it's very normal that students, law students, social engineers we talk about, don't even see them as we don't see them as normal human beings. So there, I don't think even there hasn't been any, like Shivangi pointed out, there hasn't been any good development on along these lines. And like you have also pointed out that the term gender itself is still not still developing, and even to the extent it has developed, even administrations are not actually willing to take that concept, that the broad development of that term, right? So how the term, what the term means. So I mean, it's a long way to go on those lines.
It is a long way to go, but I do see certain changes happening, and like students taking positive steps. Like the gender sensitization program my college had ever seen was initiated by students, and by a student uh, committee called ADSA. And like today only, my colleague is judging a client counseling session, and he told me that all the like participants, they would ask like what are their preferred pronouns before they initiate a conversation. It is quite refreshing to see, like this is something we should be normalizing. And I see in a lot of students, like law students bio, that they put their pronouns and they actively put that they're queer right activists or feminists, etc. So just putting it out on social media gives like I think normalizes it. But I think there has to be more discussion within the student bodies, and then it would obviously reach faculty members. Like, we actively have to make those changes, and the more we talk about it, then the more we understand where in our routine practices we have been insensitive towards the queer community and women also, and what changes we are supposed to make. Unlearning is really important, as we have all like seen through all the feminist movements and Me Too movement and other movements, that there's a lot of inherent practices, like in our families, in our general societal functioning, that we have to unlearn and actively call out such behavior. Like during the Me Too movement also, just like the point is not to just come out with the problems, and but also to acknowledge how we have been silent even when we have seen such incidences happen around us, because either we are unbothered or too scared to like say something, right? Just acknowledging the fact that we have been silent in such situations, and being silent can cause so much trauma to the aggrieved and cause so much injustice to the aggrieved. That acknowledgement is also very important for like future generation in making ourselves better people, and knowing what others and our rights are in such situations, right? So I do see like changes being made, but I don't think I'm biased here when I say a lot of these changes come just from women or queer people and not from cishet men, which is so disappointing because they constitute a large population and they constitute most of the problematic population. Like me and my friends, we are at a juncture where we have barely like guy friends from college, and like my best friend also recently in LUO had them meet like another wave of the Me Too movement, and like the closest of friends, them being things had happened in boys' hostels, and like they were like very
Uh, okay, he's back. Should I continue with this or?
No, no,
do
go ahead.
continue.
Experience in general is that whenever we talk about such instances, what men usually in the conversation, and they like, okay, it's not a big deal, it happens to men as well, when men get raped and all, which is true, get raped, no one's denying that. But if you are if you do acknowledge that men also get raped, where is your contribution towards the movement? It should anger you and not, it should not promote you to silence your voices when we bring up these issues. You have to contribute if you acknowledge this as a problem, and not as a way of shutting our voices that this is a common thing, so it happens to us, so let's just not make a big deal out of it.
The fact that they are so attacked by this is like an admission to the fact that they are the ones who do it. And right, so this basically is them admitting that even though we do it, we also like things like that happen to us as well. But that is not a counter. That is for you to acknowledge that you have not done anything to, and you are not doing anything now also, by contradict. This is not even contradiction, this is just adding, but also not acknowledging your problematic behavior and you being silent about these things and you not changing your behavior. A lack of understanding of sexual harassment is also something we need to discuss when we discuss POSH and implementation of ICC rules. Is that, see, a lot of these incidences are of sexually colored remarks or sexual gestures, which people are not so sure of whether this is something they can complain about or not. Right? These are not like physical assault, which is right in your face, sexual harassment, but these are very subtle ways of harassing someone and being dominant other people in sexual manners. This is like the complete lack of awareness about what what all can constitute sexual harassment is also something we need to discuss. And these things keep on developing. They're uh, like even when you see like judgments with respect to sexual harassment in workplaces, a lot of like actions or gestures, people did not think of them as as sexual harassment. Like, but high courts have like put it in context. This kind of behavior, this kind of action does constitute sexual harassment, and it should be looked into by the ICC. So like that is also what is something ICC and like gender sensitization programs have to discuss, that what all kind of actions and behavior like is inappropriate and comes under the purview of sexual harassment. Like just because there is a definition, even the definition is not set in its nature, right? It says sexually colored remark. So there can be a lot like numerous remarks that might be sexually colored, or like quid pro remarks, which a lot of times, uh, especially students being young and naive, don't understand, or like any other person who doesn't have much exposure to the world or realities of society, do not understand that this kind of behavior might be problematic. So even when so a lot of times, like it becomes too late to you know stop that problem. Like a lot of times, like serious incidences of sexual harassment, like physical incidences of sexual harassment, stems from inappropriate sexual behavior by the harasser. And we can stop it by complaining about such inappropriate behavior when it happens to a grave the first time, and not make it become something bigger, and make it like make them more vulnerable to something like more of a serious offense. So discussing what all constitutes sexual harassment and what all constitutes inappropriate behavior is also very, very important to discuss. And this is a discussion that has to keep on happening. It's not something you can discuss in the orientation of students, or like just one random sensitization program talk. It has to keep happening. It has to, like, these talks shouldn't be limited to limited girlfriend groups. It has to come out. It has to be discussed openly. And this is for people to reassess their behavior and be cautious about you know their own behavior and behavior of people around them, so that they can correct themselves and others at the same time. They have to be made confident to call out people, especially people who are at higher authorities, because power dynamics is something we don't discuss, which is literally the first thing that is to be discussed when it comes to sexual harassment in workplaces and educational institutions.
Apart from the reasons which you have discussed, what do you think are the major reasons that deter victims of sexual harassment from registering a complaint with the ICC?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Can you hear me?
I can,
Okay.
yeah.
So apart from the reasons which you have already discussed, what do you think are the major reasons that deter victim of sexual harassment from registering a complaint with the ICC? Why do you think they don't come out and tell the ICC what happened and what is the issue?
First being them not knowing like when and how to approach the ICC, and then not having the general support of their peers, right? So like the NLS's internal policy has uh, this provision of having facilitators who will help like sensitize like their semesters, or like certain section of student body, and them and help them facilitate any kind of like the process of filing complaint and then taking it to the ICC. Okay, which I think is a pretty uh, like student friendly thing to do. But then again, like that is not there in every educational institution. Also, the fact that um, the students, or not the students, the victims are not sure that what has happened to them might actually constitute sexual harassment. Like this confusion also is one of the reasons why they would not approach ICC. And secondly, that even if they do, the ICC will like take it very positively. Like I remember a lot of times when some students did go to ICC in my college, the first question they would ask would not be, are you, like, or like say anything supportive. The first question they would put is like, you are sure that this happened to you, right? Like this is not a frivolous complaint or this is not a false complaint. You are doing it because you're taking your revenge out on someone. Like you see the general attitude, because they are more concerned about that, this might be a false complaint, and this student, like this person who has come to us might be wasting our time by making us go through the entire ICC proceedings and make us do all of this. Their concern is not that, something like that has happened in their institution, which shouldn't have happened, and they should, now is the time that they actually take action and do something about it, right? So this attitude, like since my college had seen certain incidences before, so like they knew that ICC would not be doing anything, so they would just always discourage to approach them. Also, when certain serious offenses happen that make a, like those are offenses under the IPC, in that case the ICC, like not just the ICC, like the authorities of education institution are also like mandated to like help the victim approach the legal system, like help the victim go to the police if they want to file a private complaint with the magistrate, like whatever they are, to like facilitate all that process. I have never seen that happening. In fact, I have seen the opposite in my experience, where the education is more concerned about their brand name, that it should, like, that they would discourage students from going to the police, that something like that has happened in an in their college in certain course of administration. And because obviously there would be like media covering all of it, so it will bring like defame to college. So they would actively discourage students from going to uh, police. So like something that they're mandated to do and they're doing just the opposite of it also shows like how, even if someone approaches the ICC, what would be the consequence of it, right? And a lot of times, even when they approach the ICC, the proceedings commence, the there is no outcome of it. And as I told earlier, that the proceeding would be delayed to such an extent, the complainant also would be like, I don't want to pursue it, and the respondent obviously would be happy that this thing got extended, and there would be no outcome of it. So there are a lot of like policy changes that need, not policy changes, but activeness that is to be brought in the people who are the functionaries of ICC and people who are responsible for implementation of the policy. So like all these, everything factors in, like this. Also it all the thing that the aggrieved person might be coming from an underprivileged background also factors in here, because as I said earlier, law schools specifically are like constitute most people from privileged backgrounds who, like, we don't see it much, but their social circle also constitutes of like people who are similar to them. So a lot of people who come from different backgrounds or underprivileged backgrounds always get sidelined. And if something like that happened to them, they in general do not possess that confidence someone who belongs to a privileged background might have. So in general, like this also, like the general attitude of students also needs to change in order to make every single person be confident in the system, to approach it.
So, ma'am, I have just one last question. After that, I'll
Yeah,
hand over to Ashwini. So, you just mentioned the problems with ICC. So, what
right.
would you like to see in the way ICC operates? What do you think there should be in the ICC constitution or the way it functions to improve the way it does its stuff?
First off, the fact that responsibility of higher education institution does not end with constituting an ICC. They have to actively do every single responsibility that they possess, right? And I would like to see a complaint being, you know, like like them, they are a properly functioning ICC in the students and every person on campus. The and see taking active steps, like taking active steps against the respondent, like if they find the complaint right, and if they find that this person has sexually harassed someone, them taking like serious action, especially in cases of faculty members, like suspending them, and there are like penalties mentioned in the UGC regulations. Them actually taking those steps and not just making it go away by you know taking something like giving, like putting fine on them or just giving them a caution, right? This, other than this, I would like to um see ICC like actively coming out and ensuring that it's like their policy and the way they function is gender neutral and sensitive towards the different intersectionalities of people who are present in campus. I would like to see, you know, uh, facilitators who would help every person on campus to approach ICC and to see them, actually making changes around them. And just like even if ICC does what they're supposed to do, would like bring a lot of change in the attitude and environment of the education institution. It would actually help in reaching that goal of having a zero tolerance policy towards sexual harassment, right? I mean, starting there, would be the first step. I would want ICC members to take that step first and not uh, you know, just be there on paper that we have constituted the ICC. And there's a reason why there has to be a person from NGO who has worked in social sector, for women's rights, etc. Like there's a reason why such member is like there in like that person is a mandatory member of the ICC, is because that they're well versed with the social problems, social issues, but like as the person who constitute ICC, it's their responsibility that they appoint the right person. Because I remember before the protest during the ICC proceedings, like the NGO person which was there in my college, they had asked the complainants, what clothes were you wearing during that party when this incident happened to you? Like things that you would imagine that like there's something which we have grown out of. Like this is something that would not be asked at least in law schools, and specifically by someone who is from an NGO and works for women's rights. But you see, even in the most progressive of settings, things like that happen. Again, all those stereotypes are still true. They still hold true that all these sexist and extremely problematic comments would be made, and gender victim blaming. I would like to see ICC not just be supportive, like having a general supportive attitude, but also not be victim blaming. Victim blaming something, or discrimination is something we don't discuss very often. So I would like to see the authority who constitutes, it's usually like VC and NLUs, to constitute a proper ICC, and the ICC people being trained properly about like them having their separate gender sensitization programs and general awareness programs of how to handle ICC proceedings, right? Because as I said, sexual harassment, like what all kind of actions and justice constitute sexual harassment, they like it keeps on developing, and they have to know like what all actions and behaviors are actually problematic and does constitute sexual harassment. So they also keep on being trained properly as time goes. So this is something I would like to see ICCs doing.
Right. I don't think we have any further questions from to be asked, and it has been an excellent session, and I think it went on for over more than 1 hour. So thank you so much for
Oh, I didn't even realize.
for being here. Yeah, and we have covered quite a lot. I mean, just to highlight a few issues, and in fact, the very first expectation is that they just just do the bare minimum, which is still not being done, right? So like just being just ensuring that students are aware about these, what rights they have and how they can approach the college administration if their rights are violated, if they are subjected to sexual harassment, right? So this just being welcoming, just to ensure that they're just to have, to ensure that the students have faith in that decision is the first step towards, towards tackling these issues. And like you also mentioned, there were the problems with the power dynamic, which we often don't discuss. And even if there's ICC students, faculties there on the panel would know, most often than not, they would know, the person, the victim, and most of the time the offender then also. So we sort of don't acknowledge that the fact, and I know that has to be taken into consideration when we appoint members on the ICC, like you pointed out. So lots of things to that needs amendment and have to be changed. Hoping that law schools will take it positively and not something like, and that we're not trying to blame them or something, just pointing it out there so that things change, right? And we are not stuck at the place we are right now. So what, I mean, if you're watching here, I mean, for law students, and I hope that you get at least courage to talk about these issues with your, friends, with your peers, and try to have, create a discussion, and not just within your friend circle, but also outside it to, with your other batchmates from, from students from other batches. And if we, if we initiate from our side, from the student community, there will be like in past 3-4 years, we have seen a few, instances when the student community has come forward, has fought it, and has gotten things done from admin, right? One being what Shivangi pointed out, what a student from HNLU did. So that's something that will take it forward, and hopefully things will change. So Shivangi, if you have any last comment to leave.
I would just like to ask, not ask, like I would want them to be more active about their social rights and be more aware of sociology, of of social issues around them, and be more vocal about it. Start with your homes, have fights with your parents and your cousins. Start have fights with your peers. Like, I know the moment someone decides to do law, they are being stereotyped. Oh, इसको बहस करने का बड़ा शौक है इसलिए जा रही है, and all of that. Like, so don't take it as a compliment, because you actually are the change maker that the society desperately needs. Own your place. Own the fact that you have the knowledge of social rights and sociology to help others. Okay? And just be out there with your truth. And it takes like this amount of courage to make even a small change, and that small change can lead to like bigger significant changes in the society. So just take that small step of courage, because I believe that it is your moral and constitutional responsibility as someone who has decided to study that and make a living out of it. Right? So you are doing law for a purpose. Do not forget that, because for whatever reason or for whatever happens in your life, always remember the purpose for which you chose law, and for which all these laws, all these progressive and laws are made, all these human rights laws that you'll obviously study in your law school, the purpose, why they are made, and what changes they also need to make society a better place, to make to for every single person have a seat at the table, and especially someone who comes from privileged background. It's literally your responsibility to make space for others, pass on the mic, be a good ally, learn how to be a good ally, and make way for others.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And like Shivangi rightly pointed out, be supportive of each other, and give them space whenever someone is trying to talk about the issues, and do not try to occupy your a space which is does not belong to you, right? So that's it, and we hope that there's some sort of change will happen and will soon happen. And with that, I would like to sign off. Thank you. I'll stop the recording. If we have anything to talk about, we can.